Here are some best practices for unit testing. You should unit test every module in your system. Use a high coverage combination of white box and black box testing, ideally with a fairly granular coverage metric such as MCDC coverage or branch coverage. Use a unit testing framework such as CUnit and break tests up into fairly small chunks so it's easy to understand what each test does, and you can be sure that you did all the things you intended to do in terms of different types of coverage. Don't forget to not only get control flow coverage, which is what those metrics were about, but also good data value coverage, such as validating all lookup table entries, checking for divide by zeros, checking for unusual exceptional data values, and so on. There are a number of pitfalls to unit testing. Creating test cases is a development effort. It takes significant resources, and guess what? Test cases can also have bugs. So a failed test case could be a bug in the code, but it could also be a bug in the test case. Nonetheless, it's important to do the test cases to make sure that your code is as thoroughly debugged as possible before you begin more integrated system-level testing. If you've written code that is difficult to test, it can lead to dysfunctional unit test strategies. For example, sometimes people put their system into a breakpoint debugger, take the entire source code image and try and do unit testing with a breakpoint debugger. That is not an effective unit test strategy. If that's the only way to run your functions, then you should probably redesign to make unit test more feasible. Similarly, just because you're using CUnit doesn't mean you're doing unit testing. Using CUnit to test a 100,000-line blob of code, well, that is a sort of testing, but you're not going to get very good coverage, and it's not really what we meant by unit testing. If you use only white box testing, it is doomed to succeed. And by that, I mean there are tools that will automatically generate tests that cover all your lines of code. But those tools have no way of knowing what the values are supposed to be unless you feed them additional information. And they're not going to generate code you forgot to put in, such as missing special cases. Finally, do not substitute unit testing for peer reviews and static analysis. You should be doing peer reviews, you should be doing static analysis, and unit testing should come after the code looks clean from both of those methods.